Tonight, the impeachment showdown, well, it's more like a stalemate for now. A former Democratic congressman joins us to talk about the politics involved, and a former federal prosecutor will cover all the legal angles. Then, we're going to show you why some people are saying Trump's latest move with Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher shows that we are witnessing the quote-unquote death of decency. Also, 5 Saudis, they've been given the death sentence over the death of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, but the CIA says it's the Crown Prince who ordered it, and he got a free pass. We'll show you how the president has sided with the Saudis over his own intelligence agencies. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French here, and thank you so much for joining us on the second night of Hanukkah. Let's begin with the very latest on impeachment, and for that, let's turn to senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman. Andrew?
And happy Hanukkah, Rich. It now appears as though we will definitely go through Christmas and likely through New Year's without knowing if or when a Senate impeachment trial will happen or if witnesses will be called. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi ramping up the dispute with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell over the weekend. Pelosi insisting on codified trial rules with witnesses before she refers the impeachment to the Senate. McConnell has called Pelosi's position absurd. He says talks are at an impasse, but he has not ruled out a setup where witnesses are in fact called. The Senate is back January 6th. The House returns on January 7th. That delay also reportedly infuriating President Trump, who naturally has been taking to Twitter all day to vent. Trump is at Mar-a-Lago this week with a light schedule, so expect lots of golf and tweets, some of which could get a little more Trumpian. The president reportedly displaying a range of emotions before, during, and after last week's impeachment vote, described by aides and friends to Politico as, at varying times, surprised, disappointed, angry, furious, bitter, annoyed, worried about his legacy, and more, with one former aide saying Trump, quote, goes through peaks and valleys, but the anger stays, as a friend describes. He's very angry, it's made a deep impression, and the anger is deep and raw. So who knows which Trump we'll see and hear from next. Meanwhile, Democrats have new ammunition in their quest for more witnesses and more documents as part of a Senate trial. It's all thanks to a Freedom of Information request. Newly released emails from a budget office official named Michael Duffy to the Pentagon shows the president was asking about aid to Ukraine as early as June 19th. That's the day an article about the funds was published in the Washington Examiner newspaper. The other email was on July 25th, and it came just 90 minutes after Trump's call with Zelensky, where he asked the Ukrainian president for a favor. In that email, Duffy ordered the aid delayed and also asked that the Pentagon keep that request quiet. By the way, Duffy is one of the 4 people on the Democratic witness list for a Senate trial. Now Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the Senate, is using those emails to demand the Senate allow witnesses.
If there was ever an argument that we need Mr. Duffy to come testify, this is that information. Until we hear from the witnesses, until we get the documents, the American people will correctly assume that those blocking their testimony were aiding and abetting a cover-up, plain and simple.
And not that anyone was asking for it, but Vladimir Putin has now weighed in on impeachment. Guess which side he's on? It happened at an end-of-the-year press event last week. Putin weighed in saying Trump was impeached for, quote, far-fetched reasons. Trump then replied to a tweet of an AP story covering Putin's comments by tweeting a total witch hunt because, you know, the one man Trump's advisors really want him linked to right now is Vladimir Putin. Finally, we told you about the standoff on a Senate trial as the parties can't agree on witnesses, at least not yet, but there is a bit of an idea that's been getting some buzz about a possible witness swap. It goes something like this. If the Republicans allow, let's say, Mick Mulvaney and John Bolton to testify, then Democrats would allow Republicans to call 2 witnesses they want, like Joe Biden and Adam Schiff. There are some other names being bandied about, but those are the biggest, and should point out that no major players in the process have publicly embraced this trade idea yet. Rich?
Well, maybe the president will check with Putin to see what he should do. Andrew, thank you. Let's bring in our guest, former Congressman Brad Miller, a Democrat who represented North Carolina for 5 terms, and he's now with a law firm that focuses on whistleblower protections. I get the logic of it, Congressman, why Pelosi's going to hold up naming the managers and moving this forward until at least a pretense of a fair trial will happen. But does she have real leverage here? Does she have a card to play to kind of force McConnell to the table?
It's not clear how much leverage she has. I think it's entirely reasonable to point out to the American people how little pretense the Senate is even making that they're going to have a fair trial. The American people do want both the House and the Senate to act judiciously and act on the evidence and not just act on partisanship. And it's pretty clear that that's not happening, certainly on the Senate side. McConnell's made it clear that he will not act that way. Lindsey Graham has made it clear he will not act that way. President Trump has made it clear he doesn't want them to act that way. And that's what the American people want, and it's what the framers of the Constitution expected of the Senate.
You know, it's interesting. By now, everybody knows how polarized we are, and the numbers are pretty much split down the middle. A slight margin believe the president ought to be impeached and removed, and the counter number here saying no. But I think you point out a number that's being skipped over here. Nearly 3 in 4 Americans believe that we should have witnesses, a real trial to get to the bottom of what really happened. But there seems at least to be, from McConnell, who said that he's going to check, or basically work hand in glove with the White House. You have other Republicans in the Senate saying, I've already made up my mind, I'm not even going to listen to facts, like Lindsey Graham, that they don't believe there's any political risk for them to say, we're not even going to go through the motions. You know, they know how to count votes. But do you think McConnell might be misreading here just how much the public's willing to go along to get along?
It's not clear what Mitch McConnell believes. He obviously is not easily shamed. It may not even be possible to shame him. He may lack the necessary gene, but he has shown throughout the time that he's been majority leader in the Senate that he will act within whatever power that he has for his own benefit, for the Republican Party's benefit, without regard to what the norms or expectations may have been before that. And he obviously does not worry about the obvious insincerity or hypocrisy of his conduct. I mean, he did that with respect to the appointment to the Supreme Court after Antonin Scalia died, when other Republicans said, well, if it's someone that we would all agree on, like Merrick Garland, we should go forward with that. But he does not act within any of the usual expectations that we've had. And there are expectations that go back to the framing of the Constitution about Senate trials. They didn't expect the House to be judicious. They expected the House to be political. But they did expect the Senate to act more or less as judges would act, to be finders of fact. And Hamilton even said in the Federalist Papers that one of their considerations was they thought that the senators would be regarded as such substantial figures that they would have more credibility than judges would. And that's one of the reasons they assigned the task of trial of impeachments to the Senate instead of to the judiciary.
I'm curious from your perspective, because you haven't been away from Congress that long, but yet we have seen scenes play out that, I shake my head at. What the president had to say about your old colleague, Congressman Dingell, who's not even been gone for a year and whose wife, his widow, serves in the seat here. Let me remind folks what the president said at a rally the night of his impeachment.
Debbie Dingell, that's a real beauty. She calls me up. It's the nicest thing that's ever happened. Thank you so much. John would be so thrilled. He's looking down, he'd be so thrilled. Thank you so much, sir. I said, that's okay, don't worry about it. Maybe he's looking up, I don't know.
And on top of that, Congressman, you have former colleagues taking to the floor and drawing parallels in this season to the president and the trials of Jesus, and moreover, others comparing what the president is going through to when our nation was attacked at Pearl Harbor.
On December 7th, 1941, a horrific act happened in the United States. Today, December the 18th, 2019, is another date that will live in infamy.
Pontius Pilate afforded more rights to Jesus than the Democrats have afforded this president.
This country's end is now in sight. I hope I don't live to see it. This is an outrage.
Again, some of those characters, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Louis Gohmert, but my point is, It's like we're in a clown car sometimes, some of the insanity I'm hearing. The president, you almost expected at this point, literally mocking, the man who's buried and saying that he might be in hell. But some of the lawmakers and the lengths they go, Congressman, to defend this president, they don't have to go there. They can just say they don't believe the actions merit removal from office. But really? Bring it up Pontius Pilate and then Pearl Harbor?
Yeah. A word about John Dingell. I actually worked with John Dingell very closely on the contamination of the drinking water at Camp Lejeune that Marines and their families were exposed to over a 30-year period and suffered great health consequences as a result. And he was just a rock. I could not have more respect for him. You would not want him as your enemy, but he was a great friend to have, and I think he was a great member of Congress. And it is extraordinary for anybody, not just a president, but for anybody, to say about a man's grieving widow that he's probably gone to hell. The other conduct has become typical. I mean, we saw it in the House floor debate. We saw it in committee debate. We've seen it every time somebody's got a microphone in front of their face. There's no downside. I think Democrats probably go overboard trying to sound balanced and judicious and fair. And there's that kind of League of Women Voters sensibility about Democrats, and there's none of that about Republicans. The more negative about Democrats they can sound, the more their base, the Republican base, likes it, because so much of it is negative partisanship. We really want you to own the libs. We want you to be against Democrats. What you're for, we don't know about that, but we want you to be against the Democrats.
Brad, we've talked about this before. There is the probability at this point that the president will not be convicted in the Senate. There's probably good money odds, I should say, that there won't be one Republican that will cross over, and maybe even a Democrat won't vote for it. I just can only fathom where the president will go if he'll feel vindicated at that point. But throughout this process, I get the vibe, and I understand it too, that there are Democrats that are really worried about the norms and about the checks and balances that will be no more. I don't see from Mitch McConnell, who's a smart guy, that same level of concern about what happens if you greenlight this for Trump, where we go from here, the lack of faith the general public will have in institutions, but moreover, the rules that have governed us. It's like we're playing under two totally different set of rules, even if it's the same game.
We are, and I think more and more people have come to believe, to see that, including even the press, which has a tendency to say, both sides are guilty of this. It's really asymmetrical. No, it's one side that is guilty of this, and Democrats need to understand what they're against and change their tactics, not to be just like the other side, just like Republicans and Louis Gohmert and the others, but at least to take that into account and not act like they're surprised by it.
Well, we shall see here. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of optimism that when this actually gets to the Senate, we're going to have a Mr. Smith goes to Washington moment. But Congressman, nonetheless, I certainly appreciate your time. You have yourself a terrific holidays, and thank you.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. When we come back, we're going to go from the political to the legal. We have a good friend to the program, former federal prosecutor Mimi Rocco. She joins us with more, including some Supreme Court cases that could make things very interesting for the president as we reach the home stretch of the election.